Have you ever been bullied before? Well, I know I have in elementary school, but now we're finding out that the effects of bullying can last 40 years past the incident. But I'm going to show you what you can do about it. I'm Dr. Greg Cason, and this is Off the Couch. I think we all know what bullying is, but just for argument's sake, I'm going to read to you the definition. Bullying is a deliberate and ongoing threatening and aggressive or humiliating behavior that's directed at someone that they perceive to be weaker or more vulnerable. Bullying can be verbal, can be physical, can be social. It can be in person or even online. That's called cyberbullying. And it causes physical, emotional, and psychological harm. And a bully can be either an individual or a group that uses their power over one or more vulnerable people who feel that they're unable to stop it. We typically see gender differences between bullies, such that boys typically use more physical and name-calling, and you can see that in the movie Bully or perhaps Revenge of the Nerds. And girls tend to use more rumors and social exclusion, and a good movie for that would be Mean Girls or even Carrie. Now, cyberbullying uses verbal attacks, embarrassing photos, and even things like revenge porn, where maybe people will break up and then they'll put nude or embarrassing pictures of somebody onto the internet to get back at them. The most insidious thing about cyberbullying, though, is it can be either boys or girls who do it, and they often are hiding behind a brick wall. It's sort of like hiding behind a brick wall and throwing dirt clots over the brick wall. You can't see who it is, you just feel the dirt clot hitting you. You know, a really interesting thing is that bullies are rarely even aware that they're bullies. They won't admit that they're bullies. They blame their behavior on the actions of others. They tend to see the victim of their bullying as the person who brought it upon themselves. So making interventions aimed at self-awareness for bullies really doesn't work because all they're doing is looking at the other person. Now, cyberbullies may be the least aware of all, and that's because they don't often see the impact of their behavior on somebody else. So they post something online and they don't see the devastation that it brings and that it keeps bringing. People often think that cyberbullying is not really as bad as in-person bullying. In fact, it usually is just as bad and just as hurtful. But the problem with cyberbullying versus in-person bullying is that the cyberbullying continues on well past the initial incident. That's because the images, the information, and whatever else live online well past the moment it's put there. And it's very, very difficult to remove. So the person who suffers from cyberbullying doesn't necessarily give it up in the moment. They continue to live with it, often for years later. Now, it's like the difference between when you go to a restaurant and have a bad meal. It's a difference between maybe going and talking to the manager and having some uncomfortable moments in that moment with the manager to talk about how difficult it is, and putting a negative review online. If you have an uncomfortable moment with that manager, that will last maybe a few minutes, maybe an hour, and everyone might feel badly, but then you get over it. But the difficulty with putting a negative review online is that the restaurant could then lose tens of thousands of dollars because of your initial anger incident that you may forget about, but the restaurant has to live with for years to come. So the distress from the bullying, whether it's in person or online, does not stop when the bullying does. And as I said before, it can last 4 decades or more past the incident. And what we do know is that the more you're bullied as a kid, the worse that distress can be. Now, that distress is not just, woe is me, I feel bad. That distress can be extremely serious. You have higher risk of depression and anxiety, higher risk of suicidal thoughts, overall poor psychological outcomes, and emotional outcomes. Now, there's also difficulty forming adult relationships, increase in mental health disorders, like very serious ones like PTSD, and unemployment. And speaking of PTSD, let's think about the child's experience for just 1 second. Being in school or being at home, maybe even with one's brothers or sisters or something like that, these are supposed to be safe environments. But sometimes when one is bullied, one feels that their very life and existence is threatened. So when we have something like that happen, just even a single incident, that can be traumatic. And that incident can be burned in the person's brain. That's why it lasts as long as it does. It doesn't go away and can even change the child's self-concept, his own belief about himself. Now, a person who's been bullied as a child is actually 10% more likely to want to commit suicide or have suicidal thoughts as an adult. Now, that may not sound like much, 10%, but actually even may be more, because sometimes people who are bullied, they have more thoughts about themselves, negative thoughts about themselves, because they see themselves in a negative way, and even sometimes wonder, did they bring this on themselves? Now, as I said, bullies don't often know that they're bullies, but it can even be much worse than that. There typically is a main bully or a leader, and we see that in movies like Mean Girls. And then we typically see there are followers around the leader, people who will also do what that bully says. So the main bully tends to be the leader, and then you have followers. But things are usually much more insidious than that, because the whirlwind that bully creates is actually followed by people that don't even know the bully, because the bully has respect.
She's the queen bee, the star. Those other two are just her little workers.
Regina George. How do I even begin to explain Regina George?
Regina George is flawless.
She has 2 Fendi purses and a silver Lexus.
I hear her hair's insured for $10,000.
I hear she does car commercials in Japan.
Her favorite movie is Varsity Blues.
One time she met John Stamos on a plane.
And he told her she was pretty.
One time, she punched me in the face. It was awesome.
And so people will often do what that bully does. We also saw this in the movie Mean Girls, when Regina George had the nipples cut out of her sweater, but she put it on and wore it, and then everyone followed suit. But they're even worse than that, because although there's a leader, there are followers, and then there are people that do the bidding or follow along with that group just because they have respect for it. But also there are people who stand by and do nothing.
Two kinds of evil people. People who do evil stuff and people who see evil stuff being done and don't try to stop it.
In the school system, the people who stand by and do nothing might be teachers, might be administrators, but it's often other kids who see it happening but don't do anything themselves. Now, we often talk about, of course, the bullies having a negative self-esteem. They typically don't see themselves as having a negative self-esteem. They typically see themselves as very powerful. But what's also interesting is that people tend to be less victimized when they have a high self-worth. So the people who the bullies pick on, who might already have a high self-worth, don't tend to suffer the negative psychological consequences that someone else might. Now, that's pretty hard to start with, because often people who are bullied are separated from the pack because of some vulnerability. And that may be because their home life isn't good, or they may look a particular way or sound a particular way, something that makes them vulnerable, and then the bully tends to pick on that aspect. You know, often we want to put bullying behind us because it happened in childhood, but we're fooling ourselves if we don't think that bullying continues to happen. Hate crimes are bullying. Sexual harassment is bullying. Discrimination is bullying. And we typically see bullying from sometimes even the highest rungs of the political structure, and that makes bullying somehow permissible. So we all need to do something about this. So right now I'm going to give you 5 things that you can do to help solve bullying in your life. Number 1, come out from the shadows. Admit that you've been bullied. It's really shameful. We all want to put it in the background. We don't want to talk about it. We want to pretend like it never happened to us. But if you can admit it, you're going to face the shame and unshackle yourselves. Number 2, seek support. Find others to talk to about your experience. And if you can talk to someone else who's also been bullied, it's amazing how you'll feel that weight lifted from your shoulders. Number 3, treat the problems that went along with the bullying. Treat the depression, the anxiety, the suicidal thoughts. Treat those troubled relationships, the social awkwardness, the employment issues, all those things that resulted as a fact of our childhood traumas from being bullied. They can be helped. Don't let them weigh you down. And number 4, don't just focus on the negative, but focus on the positive. Build your self-confidence. Building self-confidence can help you. It's like a shield against future bullying. And it will also help you feel better about yourself and your life and about other people as well. And number 5, break the chain. Don't just stand by the sidelines. If you actually see someone being bullied, say something. If you see someone in the political structure bullying someone else, say something. Don't stand by it. Don't hoot and holler when someone else puts down somebody else. Even if you don't like that person, it's not good, it's not cool, and all it does is perpetuate a negative stream. If we can do all these things, we can move the nation forward, we can move ourselves forward, and we can create a better atmosphere for the children of the future. I'm Dr. Greg Cason, and this is Off the Couch.